Hey everyone, I'm Evan. Welcome to another episode of the Prof Noctis Show. We are so excited for our interview with the one, the only Bio-Roxas today. Bio-Roxas provided some awesome perspective, especially given their background as a therapist. So we hit on some topics that we haven't even talked about yet on the Prof Noctis Show. And so we're so excited for it. Wade, what did you think about it and how can people support the channel?
You're in for a real treat today, is what I would say. So, like, listen along and maybe take notes. I
Yeah.
know a lot of you are note takers, and like I had to reflect on this interview a great deal afterwards. A lot of you have asked how you can continue to support the show. Make sure that you are liking and subscribing and commenting on all of our videos over on YouTube, and also if you haven't checked out our audio-only podcast over on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you do that. Every rating, every comment, every review helps us. So we would really appreciate it if you did that. And with that, it's time for class. Let's
Let's
go.
go.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Professor Noctis Weekly Show. Even though we have kind of deviated from the weekly format, we're still calling it Weekly Show. But today, we are really excited because not only am I here with co-host Evan. Say hey, Evan.
Hey everybody, great to see you. Well, great to be seen. See, I don't.
To be seen.
Hi. Hi.
To see or be seen, right? It's something
There it
literary
is.
almost. But not only are we continuing our conversation in our lecture series on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but today we are excited to be joined by the one and only Bio-Roxas. Hey, Bio, how
Hello.
you doing?
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm so honored.
Oh no, the honor is ours. Everybody, if you are just getting to know Bio-Roxas, Bio has been I would say, fairly prolific creator in not just the Final Fantasy community, but especially the Kingdom Hearts community. That's kind of how you got your start, right? Through Kingdom Hearts, and you've kind
Yeah,
of gone
yeah,
to other things as well.
yeah, definitely. Kingdom Hearts is my bread and butter. That's
Yeah,
that's
for
what
sure.
most people, if they have any connection, they're like, oh yeah, the Kingdom Hearts guy.
Yeah, the Kingdom Hearts guy. But the thing that I love about your Kingdom Hearts content is that it goes all over the place. You've got battle primers and stuff, guides for that sort of stuff. But more recently, you've really delved into the psychology of it. We're definitely going to get into that. Anyway, everybody, welcome Bio-Roxas to the
Welcome.
show, and we're gonna continue with our Rebirth lecture series as we go. But before we get into that, we really want to get to know Bio-Roxas and hear a little bit of his story. So, Bio, introduce yourself to everybody. What do we need to know about you? Kingdom Hearts, psychology.
Yeah.
Who is Bio-Roxas?
So yeah, I originally got my start, like I said, with Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts 3 was coming out, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I'm super excited about this. And there was one subset of the combat that nobody talked about. And I don't know if you guys know too much about Kingdom Hearts or Kingdom Hearts mechanics, but there was this one system which is called the form change system, and no one talked about it. And I was like, I really like this. I'm gonna blab about this for 2 years. And so that's what I did. And so I originally got my start, yeah, with like combat analysis. I just really like to talk about like what makes combat feel good in a game, and I
Hmm.
think that also like kind of lends over to Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth with their combat system. But yeah, I just love to talk about like why does this feel good? Why does this flow so well? Or like what can be done better? And so I really like that. And then at some point after 4 years, I was like, I probably talked enough about combat and Kingdom Hearts. Let's jump to other things. And in the time that I was, making content, I was going to school for psychology, clinical mental health counseling to be specific. And so I'd always had this thing of everyone calls Sora like this sunny sunshine boy.
Hmm.
If you've been in the Kingdom Hearts community, everyone's like, oh, he's happy go lucky, he's so happy, and it
Yeah.
always like hit me like it's kind of weird because there's definitely moments in Kingdom Hearts where that mask slips, and it was never really talked about, and so I really wanted to talk about like, okay, yes, he is happy, and that's something that's good and can be positive, but also like there's that pressure and that responsibility of having to be happy for other people, and I think that's really what was like the focal point for Sora. And
Hmm.
so I wanted to dive into like, okay, well, I think a lot of people feel this pressure with, having to be happy for other people or wanting to not be a burden to other people. And so let me talk about, the psychology of that. And then that video like skyrocketed, and now I'm doing both combat mechanics and psychology. So it's been a very interesting hodgepodge of like two completely different topics.
Well, what's interesting for me is that the psychology stuff is where I first encountered you.
Mm,
I'd seen you on Twitter and stuff, and I knew that you were part of kind of the Square Enix fandom of sorts. And I was like, okay, well, he does more Kingdom Hearts stuff. But when I saw you put out the psychology of Sora,
mhm.
that was the first real time that I sat down and really watched something that you had done, and it was amazing. In fact, if anybody has not seen the Psychology of Sora video or any of the Psychology series, especially for those that are fans of this channel, these are like required reading for you. They are phenomenal and very well researched. And what I appreciated most about this is you speak as one that knows from a clinical standpoint. This isn't armchair
Mm.
psychology. This is like somebody that has done the study, done the research, written some thesis. And that to me, you have a real mastery in the way that you explain it. So that was illuminating for me. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't always been the biggest Kingdom Hearts fan.
Mm.
I didn't love Kingdom Hearts 1. Kingdom Hearts
Okay.
2, I loved the Roxas part. And then
Okay.
there was some stuff in the middle
Me
that I
too.
liked. But honestly, Kingdom Hearts 3 is my favorite of the three. Now, I say I'm
Okay.
not a big Kingdom Hearts fan. I've played 1, 2, and 3, but I didn't play the Fraction games or any of the other
Mm.
stuff. But like 1,
Um,
2, and 3 mainline,
Wait,
that's what
so
I'm all
was
about.
Kingdom Hearts 3 like really confusing for you?
No, it really
Really?
wasn't.
Oh,
I
okay,
mean,
cool.
it really wasn't. And I think that's why I give grace to people that play Remake and Rebirth but haven't
Mhm,
played OG FF7 because I'm like, hey, that's me with like Kingdom Hearts. Like,
mhm.
it's mystery and it's okay.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, Kingdom Hearts 3 was such a yeah, it's fascinating how the response to that was, because it was just this big undertaking of like, we have like 17 years, I think, or 16 years of story that we need to
Yeah,
tie this up all neatly, and there's so many expectations and things that people want to see, and obviously we're not going to get to all of that. And
yeah,
so
sure. But
it's interesting.
oh,
So
it's phenomenal stuff. But the thing about all of it was having watched the psychology stuff and really kind of um, taken an interest in you. I just got to say, getting to meet you and be around you at PAX East was like a phenomenal thing.
that
So
was so much
everybody,
fun.
we got to meet each other in person in Boston at PAX East for this convention and spent the better part of the weekend just kind of hanging out, going to panels and stuff. And you are as legit in person as you are in the videos, and I just absolutely love
Uh,
that. So
God.
massive
Thank you so
appreciation.
much. Oh, you're too kind. Yeah, no, PAX was great. It was a
It's
really,
awesome.
really fun time. That was the first time I'd gone to like any like in-person event. So it was super fun to meet you and everyone else.
For sure, for sure.
So you are our first VTuber
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
that we have interviewed. So thank you. You've paved the way for all the other VTubers. Now they won't
Mm,
be scared to come on the show.
for sure.
So I do have some questions around how you kind of got started as a VTuber, because for
Uh-huh.
some of our folks, they turned it on and here we are. We have a character and we're talking with you and it's interactive, but it's new for me. This is probably the most I've interacted with the kind of someone from the VTuber community. What is it? How does it work? And how did you get
Uh-huh.
into it?
Okay, so I don't really know. Okay, no, I'm just kidding.
I just woke up and one day I was a
One day I was just a
cartoon.
character.
Behold.
So VTubing is like I think it stands for like virtual like tubing. And so the idea is that you have like a virtual avatar that takes the place of views that maybe it's more emotive or covers up some privacy. For me in particular, when I first started using a VTube model, my wife was like, well, not my wife, me and my wife were kind of uncomfortable having like my face and everything online, especially like having our two kids, and like, I don't know, people are weird online.
Yeah.
So not everyone, but some people can get a little weird. And so when I was like thinking about trying to branch into streaming and getting more serious about that and being online, I was like, let me try this VTubing thing, because that was super new and super innovative. And so for me, a lot of like the VTubing thing is just privacy. Though now that I'm going to like in-person events, I don't know. It's so it first started as privacy. Now it's just kind of been like a mainstay of the channel. And the way that it works, actually, I use an iPhone, and so it just captures my face, and so any like faces that I make usually can capture. And yeah, it's really really cool technology. I know there's like a whole like community of VTubers, and like they have their own subculture now, and each like there's like companies that have branded VTubers, and it's a whole thing. It's wild.
Do you find that it impacted the way that you present information and how you're able to interact with folks on the channel? And is there a difference between doing it in like a preform video, like on YouTube, and with Twitch when you're maybe like live streaming? How does that kind of interact together?
So I definitely saw like a huge shift on the channel on Twitch when I started using a VTube model, because one of the things that I've been streaming, I think almost as long as I've made content, but I've always been like a faceless voice that like talks over stuff. And so for streaming, it really shifted that dynamic of like, oh, people can actually see me now and see me react to their comments
Oh yeah.
in a much more like physical way. And so a lot of people do that differently. Some people use they're called PNG tubers, where like it's a static 2D image that like reacts and moves around. And I think just in terms of like from a engagement standpoint, like having something on screen that people can interact with just is always, not always better, but usually is better. And so that was a big reason why I wanted to use something. And then on the channel, I've only used it a couple times, and people have been pretty receptive to it. The first few times that I had it, because when I do like these random like off the cuff videos where I was just kind of yapping and not really really have a script or any like points to make on screen, I was like, man, I don't want to just have like gameplay playing, because that's like people are going to click off of that. And so I was like, well, what like I have this VTube model, what if I just use that?
Oh yeah.
And so it helped with, yeah, it definitely helps with engagement, just because people, can see somebody.
Now I've got to ask, did you model this after Roxas, or is that also just like coincidental?
Kind of. So my channel brand has it first started as this crown that's on one of the keyblades. So that was my first brand. And then as I moved into like, I don't know, making more content, I had an artist friend that made like a Roxas character, and they just like sketched out Roxas, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm gonna like, I'd love to use that as my channel art. Every iteration that I've made of like the new profile picture, I've tried to like shift it away from Roxas, because I don't want to get sued.
Yeah, sure.
So, and I mean, Square Enix is very kind. They've partnered with me, and I've worked with them, and there's never been an issue, which is like, whew, like that's great. But I've always like tried to be very particular in how I design the VTuber and the characters, because I definitely, with a name like Bio-Roxas, any blonde character with like this outfit is going to look like Roxas. So
Sure.
it's like there's only so much I can do. I think this coat is modeled after when Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, they did this like streetwear lineup. And so it's actually like, I think it's modeled after like the streetwear Roxas design.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then I have like a little satchel that has donuts, which is just a dumb meme in my community. And then I have like some like swords and little knickknacks on my belt. So like one is the Final Fantasy XIV Mother Crystal, one's a Keyblade. I think the others are like Cloud's Buster Sword, and I think it's a near automata weapon.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I had this idea of like I'm gonna add like a little badge to every game I play on stream,
Yeah.
and then I didn't keep up with it.
Yeah.
But you have little merit badges on your sash. I love
Yeah,
that.
right. I was like, oh, this is so cool, and then yeah, I kind of dropped it.
Oh, hey, listen, they're there. They look great. As we kind of transition into your work in academic life and in professional life, I also know that you recently had a job transition. How was that going? Feeling good?
Yeah, I don't know how much I can talk about it, but so I originally, when I went to school, I went for my master's in mental health counseling. I got my LPC, which is like a licensed professional counselor license. Sorry, and then when I graduated, I actually went into substance abuse treatment
Mhm.
or substance misuse treatment rather. And so I did that for a long time, and then just recently shifted to, I guess the best way to put it is like government contract work.
Mhm.
I think I don't know, like I don't know exactly what I can share and not share, but yeah.
Sure.
So I've shifted away from substance misuse to like military stuff actually. So it's very interesting. Very
Gotcha.
interesting.
Well, I'm grateful that you mentioned all of this stuff because for the purposes of our conversation today, what it does is it does grant a lot of legitimacy and credibility to a lot of the things that you say. There's a lot of people online that, have nice ideas and theories and stuff, but to hear somebody that's like, hey, I'm living this, right? Like this is clinical. There's a lot of stuff. So when I'm trying to say and speak about things, this isn't just a random thought, but it is grounded in some study and some research. So I really appreciate you sharing that aspect of things.
Yeah, and I think we get, especially in this day and age with like social media and just how fast conversations happen. Um,
Mm,
Mm.
there's a lot of uh, decisions and stuff that we make very emotionally, where we feel a certain way, right? And we think, oh, like I feel this, so this must be right, right? It's like a
yeah.
postmodern, I think, viewpoint,
Mhm.
which is completely valid. But I think sometimes we make claims based off of those feelings that
Mm,
then kind of don't have a basis in a lot of things. And so,
yeah.
um, one of the things that I like to do with my videos is pull apart these video game characters that we've grown up with, because I think it sets up a really interesting uh, conversation about like why do so many people resonate with these characters,
Mm,
and what's so special about them.
Yeah.
uh, and not to I try to be very particular, like very pointed with this of, yes, I have a clinical background and I do have training, but also like the things that people experience and that they've learned through these characters are not invalid because I've given a different viewpoint.
Mhm.
um, and I think that's like something that's very important to note is, yeah, I do have backgrounds, but also I don't want my word to come across as fact, because we all have different experiences. These characters are written in a way that we can relate and connect to on different fundamental levels. And so just because me as a counselor, like just because I come up and say like, oh, this is what I think, I don't want that to invalidate like what someone else relates to or has found through characters.
I
thank
think
you for saying that. On this channel, we talk about lenses that we see different games and characters through, and so the lens that you offer definitely offers some foundation, some grounding and stuff. But I appreciate you saying it doesn't have to be the only one. So thank you for that. That's
Yeah,
great.
because I definitely don't want it to come across as like, oh, well, like you feel that way about this character, but that's not right. This is the
Yeah.
real thing, right? Because that's definitely not what I would want to get across by any
Yeah,
means.
but when it comes to theories, obviously yours are right and everybody else is
Yeah, no,
wrong. So.
yeah, exactly. Thank you.
I think you have a very invitational style in the way that you present the information. You're
Mhm.
inviting everyone to look at this psychological concept and then apply it to the character, right? It's not this
Mhm.
is not the definitive conclusion for why they would, but what we're trying to do is spark curiosity about maybe why they make the decisions
Exactly.
that they do, and then maybe take the extra step to spark some curiosity about why we make the decisions that we make and why
Mhm.
we feel the way that we feel. And Wade talks a lot about that in the lecture plays and in some of the kind of character breakdowns of why do we think they made this decision? How do you think that impacts you personally? And it takes it kind of in that application the direction of application, making it real in our lives, coming off of the screen. We have a segment called Fantasy to Reality, where we take things from the screen and the page, and we try and take the ideas and the concepts and make them more real. And I think that your videos really do that for others. How did you first find out that that would be a good format to do that? Like, why did you start making videos about that? Like, what was the transition from I'm making animation videos and about battle concepts, and I know you do it for Final Fantasy XIV, to I'm going to start doing some of these psychology ones? Was there a moment that kind of flipped that switch? What did it look like?
Okay, so I traced it back to like a couple podcasts I was on. In the Kingdom Hearts community, where I kept not ragging, but just kept going on about, everyone thinks Sora is super happy, but like there's something deeper there. So it's always been an idea I wanted to do. And I think I want to say like writing it took like a year, because me and Thought Bubble YouTube, who is the other person on that video, me and him got connected, like, I don't even know, but I'm pretty sure it was like a year or 6 months or 8 months, where it was on and off of like, oh, we'll just kind of like chat about this, we'll write down some ideas, and eventually we'll get this big video out. And the closer that we got to like getting a fully formed script, the faster that kind of got. And then eventually I was like, okay, I want to pull the trigger on this. I also like have learned a lot about like what goes into making this kind of video, and I really think it can be helpful. And then I had some thoughts of like, okay, well, if this is received well, then maybe I'll do some more. And then the response to it really was like, okay, this is helpful. This is something that I want to like give to others. And there was actually a moment where we were cutting it all together, because there was a bunch of different trains of thought. So there was a section where we kind of went game by game, and we're like, here's all the things about Sora. And then there was a second section where both of us were trying to like wrap up our thoughts on it. And I remember I was like, I'm going to put all my thoughts together in one part, and then I'm going to let John Thought Bubble put his stuff together. And he was like, well, hold on. Like, there's this like one I think it's very powerful at the end, where it's just like reminding people, like, if you relate to Sora, like, you are not a burden. I think that was like a really big focal point of the video. And I just like had thrown that into the end of my section. He was like, well, like, this is really important. Like, I think people can learn from this. Let's like make this its own thing. And so that was kind of what turned the gears into not just a one-off video on psychology and why this is about Sora, but shifting the focus of like, okay, how can I use these characters to either give messages to people or to help them learn something? And so after that, and after the response, I was like, okay, I want to do more of this. I want to take these characters and get something across with each one.
Yeah, you say you like to pull apart the characters, right? And examine kind of some of the moving parts and get past what's on the surface, maybe even in the games of the characters. And that, an important concept for our lives as well. How do you think taking that kind of lens and applying it to video game characters helps us as individuals maybe slow down a little bit in life, to be able to understand ourselves better and understand the world around us? Because I want to get into some of these videos that you made, especially around the psychology of cloud that Wade is really interested in talking about, and everything. But let's, like, as a base concept, what does it look like to examine a video game character that way, and how does it help us as people slow down and begin to understand ourselves and others better?
Well, I think the format that I've finally kind of landed on with the series is going just step by step through the journey of the character, and I'm still like learning it. I don't think I've honed it quite yet.
Sure.
But I think one part that kind of helps is just taking a step through each game of like, okay, here are the moments that we see where we see something, right? I can maybe point out some things here, and then I'll keep it moving, and then at the end I'll kind of tie everything up. And I think what that does is it helps people as they're playing a game start like picking out moments. Because a lot of times I feel like we get caught up in the emotion and the pacing of a game, that we start like just looking for the next big moment, right? Like, it's it's been a couple side quests, I can't wait until the next big battle, right? And kind of shifting that to like, there are these really interesting character moments that if we're just looking for the next big action sequence, we're going to miss. I think the best example comes from some of the Final Fantasy games, like Final Fantasy 14 or 16 have really, really, really good character writing. And I think a lot of people can get caught up in like, oh, these are just side quests. And it's like, no, like these side quests and these slower moments are the important pieces to me, like, because you get to see the thinking, you get to see the side talk, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's really, for me at least, like showcasing like, oh, here's like a little side conversation, or like here's what happens if I'm getting particular in the weeds.
That's what
There
we
are
do.
parts in Final Fantasy. There's parts in Final Fantasy VII, right, where like Cloud has like different voice lines if you talk to people multiple times, right? And so like picking those out and showing like, oh, hey, here's a piece of like Cloud's personality that we don't really see unless we're taking our time and going through it. And so I think hopefully by kind of showcasing and diving deep into characters, it helps people look at gaming differently and not just as like, we need the next big spectacle, but I really enjoy these slower moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Rebirth to me perfectly illustrates kind of what you're saying. One of my favorite scenes in that entire game is the calm at sunset at Costa del Sol, when it's just like the sunset on the beach and you just have this very quiet moment after this spectacle where you can spend as much time or as little as you want on that beach talking to characters and just I think I did photo mode for like 2 hours on the beach, but that's my journey, but and maybe my addiction, I'm not sure, but it's what I love. But it is moments like that where it gives you a time to reflect and to pause. And I think that you are able to draw those things out so well.
All right, everybody, it's that time in the episode where we get to know each other a little bit better and take a stretch. I know that your arms don't work, Bio, we found that out, but maybe we can do neck stretches in honor
I can wiggle.
Here we go.
Get the wiggle. That's great. That's great. This is our mini game stretch break. But before we do, we got to hit that music. So 1, 2, 3. Well done. Well done. Thanks, everybody, for participating.
Spot on.
It's perfect. I have our bingo wheel of vulnerability. Wade has our geek therapy question cards that we're going to use to get to know one another a little bit. So, Bio, you get to tell us when to stop. So here's a little audio preview for the people. And are you ready to say stop?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Tell me when.
Okay. Stop.
Wow. Okay, there it is.
I
Oh, we didn't guess our numbers.
Oh, wait, what?
Oh, we have to guess a number, yeah.
I saw
It means nothing, but we sometimes
We have to
get
start
it
over.
right.
Wait, start over. Okay. Take 2.
Actually, you guys got the number.
Begin.
I know the
Just begin
number.
again.
I saw the number. I know the number. I will not guess. I will abstain this episode.
What does it go up to?
1 through 50. So, listener, guess a number 1 through 50. Wade, what's your...
12.
Okay.
45.
The number was 18. 18.
Dang.
So
18.
I saw
Whoa,
it.
okay.
I saw it, and I feel terrible. I've ruined the integrity
Okay,
of the
you did.
very prison that I invented to trap us in.
At least you abstained from the guessing, because
Yeah,
you really could have taken it and run with it at that point.
Yeah.
You could just
but-
guess and be like, oh no, I'm right. Wow.
Then it wouldn't have meant as much,
That's so true.
There's an ethical lesson in there somewhere. So 18, question number 18. What do we have, Wade?
10, 11, 12, and we've got 18. There we go. Okay, so here it is. From Geek Therapy Card Deck, it says, the topic is video games. There's like 5 different topics, so that's not coincidental. Identify 5 events or mechanics in video games that you found frustrating and recall how you overcame those difficulties. How do these relate to similar or different, compare and contrast with real life scenarios? For example, when we become frustrated in real life, how can we use the lessons we've learned in games to help us overcome these difficulties? So identify, it says 5 events. I'm going to just say 1.
1 or 2, yeah.
No sense for 5. This is not an hour-long session. But what is an event or a mechanic in a video game that you found frustrating, and how did you overcome those difficulties and relate it to real life?
Vile will let you go first as our guest, unless you would like more time, and then you can kick it back to one of us.
Okay, so this was Yeah. So I love this game called Final Fantasy XIV. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
Mhm.
I'm familiar.
But there's end game in that game in the form of raids, like savage raids, ultimate
Okay.
raids. There's a whole tier system. So it starts out with like normal dungeons that you do through the story, and then you fight a boss, which is called a trial. But then after you beat the story, you have what's called an extreme trial, which is like a harder version of the trial. And then you also have this separate thing called raids. There's normal raids, there's savage raids, and then there's ultimate raids, which are kind of like boss rushes that are like half an hour long. So there's a lot of tiers to them. And when I first started in the game, I was not great at the game. And so I'd always get really frustrated and like think that like my static hated me, and that like they were gonna kick me out, and like just a lot of like negative self-talk, right? And so I was like, oh my god, this is the day that they're gonna kick me out because my numbers are too low and I keep messing up mechanics.
No.
And so yeah, it was like a really like tough point of like I really enjoy this. This is supposed to be fun, but I'm also like I have all this like negative like self-talk and all this doubt, right? And so I don't know. I eventually got over that by, like talking to my static and being like, I'm so sorry. And like, kind of, I guess like getting that evidence back from them of like, oh, like what you're telling, kind of going to like the conversation about core beliefs and stuff of like, I was continuing to get evidence that like my static was not going to kick me out and that they like didn't hate me. And so that subtly started like shifting my thoughts, right? Of like, okay, maybe I'm not a failure. Maybe I'm not like awful. And so it helped to like shift that to a very distressing thing in the game to like a very like fun thing of like, oh, okay, like I'm learning, right? I can give myself some grace and a little bit of take the stress off.
Wow.
Oh, that is great.
We should have let him go last.
Yeah,
Sorry.
That was a really good answer.
Oops.
Evan, what about you?
Oh, for me, I think one of the most frustrating game mechanics of all time. It's gotten better, but it's also we just don't do it anymore. You'll notice it less and less in games. Is escort quests, where you have a special little follower or helper that has to like be somebody that journeys with you, and you got to get them from point A to point B, and they either walk too slow, too fast, they get in the wrong fights. Like it's better if they're invincible, right? Like it's not a big deal because they're like, okay, you know what, I'll get there eventually. But when you have to protect them and they just keep aggroing everything around you, right? And so I think
true.
I think for me, I'm going to compare it to, those days when you're just in a bad mood.
Sure.
But it's probably from something that's not necessarily related to what you're dealing with, actually in individual situations. But you don't want to apply your stinky attitude to people who don't deserve it. You know what I mean? And I think the determination and the insulation and the focus that it takes to actually complete the escort quest, where you're paying extra attention to make sure that the follower isn't aggroing somebody, or if they get into a fight that you're quickly there to protect them. I think for me, it's internal management of recognizing that what I'm escorting is the version of me that people deserve to interact with, not my frustrations with an unconnected situation. And so the same attention that I'm going to pay to my escort character, I'm going to pay to my own attitude, actions, and the way that I treat people. I'm going to be a little more vigilant than I would normally than just running around in a game, because people deserve my best. And so I'm going to put forth the energy and the intention to give that to them because they deserve it, and out of respect for them. So that's me.
Another good answer. Well done, Evan. For me, mine's going to come from Final Fantasy 15. This is I tell people, this is a 7 out of 10 game that's a 10 out of 10 in my heart. But there is one really frustrating thing about this game. And people in the comments will be like, no, there's a billion frustrating things. Well, listen, it made me a doctor, so I'm fine. In the game, there was this choice to button map action button as the jump button. Okay, so when you go to people or pick up an item, you almost always will jump first.
Oh, no.
Because you haven't quite targeted it just right. I'm trying to go around and play the game or whatever, 100% it, and all this stuff, and I just constantly am jumping. Well, one day in class, my students were sharing this frustration. They're like, why can't I just pick up things without jumping? Why can't I do this? And y'all, like, I had this like moment of, we can turn this. And I said, that's the traditional greeting. Before you talk to people, you have to jump. And like, they of course knew that it was nonsense, but it into this like joke with my class of like, oh yeah, we're giving the traditional Lucian greeting, where I would have students come up to me and be like, hey, Dr. Langer, and they would jump in front of me and then go and sit down in their seat.
You just have people bunny hopping around the classroom.
It was amazing, but
Wow.
it was one of these exercises of turning something that could be really frustrating into this inside joke. And the kind of life lesson I've taken from that is sometimes just be lighthearted. Okay, and like sometimes things aren't that big of a deal. Just enjoy life for what it is, and turn it into something humorous or positive. So that's a life lesson for me.
Awesome.
Well, listener, get a little stretch in. Let's get another little stretch in. Our VTubers can get their wiggle. Yes, here's the next stretch. Take a moment, relax, enjoy the rest of the episode. But we hope your day is going okay. We hope that this just gives you a moment of pause. Recognize your body, that you exist, and that you're, worthy of love and acceptance. Just those easy things. We'll see you as we get back to the episode here.
In these videos. So I do kind of want to shift over to those videos at this point. Psychology of Cloud. This video hits me on so many different levels, and I want to go in like a million different directions right now. But my first question for you is, why Psychology of Cloud? And what was it like creating this, I mean, I would call it a tome for this kind of sacred cow of a game?
Let me think. So when I made my Kingdom Hearts 3 videos, Final Fantasy VII Remake was coming out just around the corner. It wasn't super on my radar until like it was like almost out. And so when I played that game, I was blown. I mean, everyone was blown away, I think, but it was incredible. And I met Sleep Easy through a fellow like Kingdom Hearts friend, actually, funnily enough.
Wow.
So it's a crazy story. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Tatsumaki. He's a streamer back in the day. Me and him got super close. One of his chatters was a fan of Sleep Easy's. So me and Tatsu were Kingdom Hearts streamers. Sleep Easy, of course, was in like the Final Fantasy VII sphere. And this chatter was like, I really want to connect Sleep Easy and Tatsu. So let me get them together and have them talk. And then at some point I got like wrangled into a voice call. And so we all started talking, and let me think. Let me cut all the details. And so eventually me and Sleep Easy started just talking about like the lore of Final Fantasy VII and kind of how closely it lined up to Kingdom Hearts. And that's what like really stoked that flame of like, man, Final Fantasy VII has some really, really deep characters. And so with Rebirth coming out, I was just like, man, I really want to have just like a character dive into who Cloud is, so that in the event that Remake, Rebirth, and the third game are actually a sequel, that we have some reference of like, okay, how has the character shifted? And so I think at the time when I started writing it, I was very convinced that like Remake and Rebirth were a sequel to the OG7, where like this was a different Cloud, or farther in the future, like everything had like shifted temporally. I don't think that's the case anymore. I could be wrong.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I'm pretty sure now it's more of like it's just a retelling of it. And they're just
okay. So you've stumbled upon what I would call a landmine in the community. So what was it about Rebirth, just briefly, and then I want to get back to the Psychology of Cloud video. What was it about Rebirth that convinced you that this is a retelling and not a sequel?
I'll buy you a little time to think about it, because whenever Wade always says, okay, yeah, well, that's, briefly, and then asks a question that necessitates a 15-minute response.
Like 15-minute answer, right? I know.
So there, I bought you some time for the question.
This is what my students do in class too. They're like, hey, listen, I can't. So
yeah. Okay. So I think I think the reason I think that it's a retelling and not a sequel
Mm.
uh, is just the developer response to the feedback of remake. I think they had a very not a very different story, but it seems like the feedback from remake caused them to shift slightly in what they wanted to do with Rebirth. And I think that's also like highly debated about like if the devs have a plan for it or if they're going off fan feedback.
Mm.
And I look back to like Aerith and her response to the whispers, right? And, like, how in remake she's very much like she is very much from the future, right? But then when we shift into Rebirth, all of that future knowledge has kind of been taken from her.
Yeah.
That seems very much like, oh, okay, there was something we had in mind, but now we're going to maybe shift to just like, oh, like there might be future events, but also like this is very much just happening for the first time, kind of. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And like, if you talk to 10 different creators on this, they're going to have different responses as well. And I think that so many people have kind of shifted back and forth between that. Some are still diehard, it's a sequel. Others are like, no, it's always been a retelling. Do you, if it was all part of the plan in remake to Rebirth, and we know that they've shifted some things, what do you think that Aerith losing her memories or future memories of the Whispers does narratively for Rebirth that maybe remake was maybe critiqued for and not able to do? Do you think it's a better choice? Just comment briefly on that.
So I have two thoughts. One is about fan interaction with developers content.
Mm.
Other is like how does it impact the shift with Aerith forgetting everything? Because I think remake very much has like that ominous feeling of, okay, we're in a story, but obviously like Aerith and Sephiroth are playing on a completely different level, right?
Yeah.
They are talking to each other, saying things that we as the player have no idea what they mean, really.
Right.
And as like you dive into it, maybe you can start putting the pieces together, but it's very much like we are talking about things that you're going to go play the third game and then come back and see how this lines up, right?
Yeah.
They're talking about the future. With Rebirth, I feel like them taking Aerith's memories shifts it back to a present focus, right?
Okay,
Like we're still
interesting.
fighting against, she's still wanting to fight against the future that is coming, I think. But we're very much now in a point where all of our party is centered in the past or in the present, and we're moving towards the future. Whereas remake, right, again, kind of going back, Aerith was very much from the future or had future knowledge that she was trying to shift the outcome of the present.
Okay, so
oh, sorry.
Oh no, I'm just going to rephrase and restate so that everybody's kind of caught up. So you're saying that it was both a tonal shift in between the two games where the way that it was approached from the character's side and some of the writing kind of gave some indications there was maybe a change. And then you also think it was a focal shift. And those were the two things for how you kind of picked up on it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so I feel like, yeah, now we're at this point with the third game of, okay, the person that was supposed to help us with the future is now gone. And now we're up against somebody that is completely on a different level. And so it's almost like we're having to navigate something where the other person already knows the outcome. And we don't have that extra help anymore, which is going to be fascinating. I'm so excited.
we have to clarify just for the audience and for everybody. You're speaking of Aerith, losing Aerith.
Yes.
Is it safe to assume that you were on the side that Aerith has died?
Okay, I'm going to put a pin in one thing. I think I see you were writing something down. I want to come back to this about how fan interaction impacts developer content and like my feelings on that, because I have a lot of feelings on that.
I will bring it back up.
For Aerith, I'm very nihilist in the sense of I don't know if nihilist is the right word for it, but I really want the events of this whatever this is, right?
Yeah.
This trilogy to be like really, really dark. Like my thinking is I wanted Aerith to live in the end, only to get to the very last game and realize that in order to save everyone or to have the least consequence to the planet and the people on it happen, she has to die.
Wow.
Right. And so I wanted it to be this very like this tragedy almost, right? Of like, oh, we did save her in the second game. She's okay. We're gonna change the future. And then you get to the end and they realize we can't do that. Like if we want to save people, right? Like especially Aerith, right? That like seeing that inner struggle between like she really wants to live, right? She wants to either, you know, be with these new friends or have a way of bringing Zach back. But then like having to wrestle with, okay, I can save myself and these people and essentially doom the earth, or I can go back and perish to save everybody else. And I think that like that would be like just such a that'd be such a hard thing to navigate. And
wouldn't it be?
So that's my like horrible dark like no one wants to have that experience happen, but like I think that would like narratively, I think that would be just a like a really interesting, tough conversation to have.
Aerith says something in chapter 1 of Rebirth, and they're talking about Sephiroth. They're saying somehow he's alive, and she says, I don't know so much about him being alive as much as around. Would it be fair to say that Aerith at the end of Rebirth is around, not necessarily alive? And what do you think is the consequence collateral of that?
Well, okay, at this point, I don't know if it's too different than what she was in like the end of OG7 and into Advent Children, right? Because she's very much around in a sense, talking to Cloud and like still interacting. So to me, and I'm not a lore master, so I don't know like what all has been theorized or what all has been found. But for now, right now, it feels like she's very much in the same place she was in OG7 and in Advent Children. But I don't know.
Yeah. Wait, if you'll just say what the significance of that would be for people who maybe don't know what like OG versus Advent Children versus where we're at right now.
Sure,
I know we're pretty deep into a video about some specific stuff, but just give like the 15-second, like this is what this means, this is what Advent Children is, and this is that. That way we can
so,
in.
Yeah.
In the original game, Aerith dies, and yet she is still, in some ways, her prayer, at least her power through a specific materia that she has left behind is still taking effect and still empowering the party, still fighting against Sephiroth and his forces. And this is coming up in pretty illustrative detail in the Rebirth, remake Rebirth trilogy. Advent Children is the movie sequel to Final Fantasy VII OG and probably the sequel to the remake trilogy as well. We don't know until the third one comes out. But allegedly the devs say it's lining up. She is present in Advent Children in these sort of like, not really visions because they're like real, but she still interacts. She is around with the players, even though she is canonically dead at that point. So that's kind of what we're referencing, Evan.
Okay, great. Everybody, you're caught up. You understand everything now. We can
everything. In, please. So we want to make sure that we come back to what you just said about devs and feedback and stuff. So please let's loop back on that, and then we'll get into some other stuff.
I can restate the question for.
I think I remember what it was about, like how the fans' response might have shifted or impacted some of the devs' direction that they took for the story. Again, we don't know how much that actually like impacted it. We don't know how much they've written. We don't know how much they are taking fan feedback into consideration.
Right.
But whenever I hear that, I always like, I don't know, I cringe a little. Not like cringe, but like I'm very averse to feedback impacting the intended design that somebody has. Right.
You're like the king of the whispers. things to follow the plan, right?
Yeah, right. And so when I heard like that fan feedback was taken into consideration, I think I've seen articles that said like the main story that they want to say isn't really impacted, but maybe some of the smaller things are. And again, that could be possible. But I'm always just averse when I hear that because
Yeah.
I think if you have a story that you want to say and that you want to like that you have, that you should push for the story and the vision that you have. It goes it's really silly. It goes back to this manga I read as a kid called Bakuman, not the little like metallic balls that turned into monsters, but it was about two mangaka that wanted to write their own series, and it followed them, and it was slice of life. And one of the ending arcs of it was they wanted to get an anime, and so they did everything that they could to get popular. And so one of the things that they did was they started taking fan submissions in and trying to work that into their pieces, right? And so they started like taking in fan theories and what the fans wanted to see. And at first, people were like, "Oh, great! Like I'm seeing my stuff," but then the engagement and the fan reception started to turn on them because it was no longer along for the ride, right? There was this almost like shift in how people engaged with it because of like them not bending to their fans, but just almost like took the expectation that the fans had of them, right? It was this almost like, oh well, like why aren't you telling the story that you want to tell,
Yeah.
right? Why do you feel like, why are you not confident enough in your story to tell it how you want to tell it? And so that's always like stuck with me. Of again, that's I'm not I'm not trying to say that the writers of Seven are not confident, but that always just kind of creeps into my mind when I see like fan feedback taken in.
I was in a book club discussion just the other day, and someone was talking about I forget the name of the author. It was an author or professor, and he was talking. He was one of the teachers of George R. R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones. And obviously, Game of Thrones is not finished yet as of the recording of this. That final book he hasn't written, but
Really?
the advice,
I didn't know.
yeah, Winds of Winter, I guess, is the last book, and it's not out yet, and he supposedly is writing it anyways. The advice that was given to him by his professor was don't release any of your books until you've written all of them. Basically, don't put out anything. Like if I could go back in time, I would write everything that I wanted to write and just release it as one go. Now, obviously, in video games, that's not really possible, and it's not really possible in writing either. I mean, you typically need some money to be able to write more things, but I think it illustrates a little bit of that tension that exists within that creative process.
Because right, like once you see, if you're writing a trilogy and you're like, man, I really want this person to die in the third game or the third book, and then you see everyone, like you put out the first book and everyone loves this character,
Right.
now you're like, oh no, like
Right.
like maybe I should change things, right? Because if this character dies in this book and everyone loves them, they might be upset, and so maybe now I'm gonna stop foreshadowing that or stop setting that up and try to like shift gears that maybe they almost die and then they don't. I don't know. Yeah.
It's such a challenge, right? And even as content creators, to stay true to the vision and desires of yourself, what you want to put out into the world versus what's going to get traction and stuff. And it's such an interesting balance between what you want to create and what may really catch fire. So I'm sure that that's a temptation for a lot of people out there.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's so easy to think, oh, I'll just do whatever's popular. But I think, and you see that happen to some creators where like they get labeled as like a sellout, or they get labeled as somebody that is a fence sitter, or like, right. And so in this shift to want to appeal to as many people as possible, right, you dilute yourself and your content, because if you're if you're not confident enough to follow through in the vision that you have, I'm a very firm believer that like people can pick up on that. Like I think we put a lot of ourselves into our content, and when we don't put 100%, or if we don't put our authentic self into stuff, I think that kind of bleeds through.
100%.
I don't know. That's kind of like I don't know if that's clinical or like
Well,
basically kind of
maybe. Well, one of the things that we've learned is that content creators, especially some that are just getting started or interested in something, maybe it's not even content creation through video, but some other means of creation, they listen to this. And one of the things, that feedback that I've gotten is keep asking those questions, because it helps me clarify the kind of thing that I want to create, what kind of creator I want to be. So I appreciate you answering that question. That's great.
Yeah. Well, and I think as a new creator, it's very easy to get like, I don't know, like it's almost like a fire hydrant of like
Yeah.
response and engagement. Like if you're not
That's
ready
true.
for it, I don't think anyone can be ready for it. Like once you have a video catch fire, or once you start building an audience, like it
Mhm.
is very intimidating, because like we're all people, right? Like
Yeah.
there's not better people than others, right? Like, and I
Right.
think there, like when you start gaining traction of any kind, there starts to like be that shift, and like, oh, you have to, you have to know everything, or you have to know exactly like, every point of Final Fantasy VII before you talk about it. Like
Yeah.
those expectations that come up about people, because I don't know why, but
My, it's my favorite thing about this fandom, and it's also one of the things I'm like, ooh, ouch. Like anytime you go to a convention or something like that, people will get into the weeds. Sometimes with voice actors, and the voice actors are like, I don't know, like
it is
that's
realized.
that is some minutia and some detail that wasn't in that scene. So
Yeah.
that's
I
just
think it happens with
interesting.
any fandom.
It does.
It's yeah, because it happens at Kingdom Hearts, where like
Oh, I
the
am sure it happens in Kingdom Hearts.
There's not a lot of
so,
crossover IPs in that game, are there?
nah, I don't think so.
Just a few.
It's an
There's so many
ambitious,
moving parts and details.
it's
It's
an ambitious
interesting.
game. I do wonder how that impacts our development as people. And here's what I mean by that. What we're talking about with content creation and the way that the feedback that you receive impacts the kinds of things that you maybe want to make or influences how you talk about it. It does seem like a little bit of a microcosm of the individuation process that we kind of all undergo, how we become the people that we are, how we determine what's important to us, what our values are, who I am and what I'm about, and the impact that external feedback has on that. From your experience in life and then clinically, what does that process look like, and how does thinking actively about it help us to achieve the life that we want, feel called to, and be more satisfied with? That's a big question. Sorry.
So let me ask it back to make sure I understand. So how does like, let me think, I just lost it, I had it. How do we creators like react to like the communities that we're a part of, and how we create content for it?
Yeah. So using that as the example, the idea that someone else's feedback would impact your path and decision, right? As a core thing. We experience
Yeah.
that in life all the time, not about content creation, about just life creation and individuation and growing as a person. How do we learn about how to have a more active role in understanding what that impact of that external feedback is, and comparing its validity and importance with becoming the person that we want to be?
I think like there's two different things. I think like as a creator and just like engaging in a fandom, and correct me if I'm getting off track, but I think like individually, I think we all are wired for connection, right? And so I think as we connect with people and we get into these fandoms, as we make content, there's a very strong urge to not rock the boat, in a sense of like, I'm just thinking of like individuality and like not herd mentality, but like being part of a group.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that weird like push and pull in that balance of
Yeah.
I don't want to I don't want to upset people, right? But also like I want to say things that maybe aren't going to agree with everyone. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
I think the easiest example is like with like shipping, right? Like there's
Mhm.
pocket fandoms where people find a lot of like identity and like self-expression through these, uh, through these connections that they have with the characters and who they see as together. But then that pushes up against like another
Mm.
group that says like we see something completely different, and how does that
Mhm.
like does that impact things? And so, uh, yeah, I don't know. I feel like with, and maybe I'm getting off track, but I feel like with individuality, there's this like deconstruction and reconstruction period when we get into a fandom where, in my experience, I don't know if this happens, but there was a time where I kind of lost a lot of my identity in trying to like connect with the fandom, where I was like, oh, I want to get along with everyone. I don't know how to do that, and so I'm just going to like just try to like get along with everybody. And doing that, I think I lost a lot of like my own individuality. And like I like over the past couple of years, probably like 2 years, I like saw like, wow, like I really don't know who I am in the community or just like in myself in general, just because I've poured so much of myself into content and into this community, and I didn't spend the time to pour back into myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so like over the past couple of years, I've tried to like take a step back and kind of solidify my own individuality some more. So it's been interesting. Did that answer your question? Was that did I go off track?
No, totally. Wade, I
think
think
so
head there.
well. Could I ask a follow-up question to that? You said you've spent some time doing some of this stuff. What is it that worked for you to help you reflect and offer care to yourself so that you could find some individualization and identity?
I think it kind of took just realizing that I was very isolated. In the sense of like once I hit, not like I didn't hit like rock bottom or anything, but like there was a point where like I didn't feel connected to anybody because I just like, I don't know, like in the effort to connect with a fandom and connect with everyone, I'd almost like isolated myself. And so it was that point of like looked around and I was like, I don't even know who I am. Like I'm trying to like
So
enjoy
tough.
this fandom and like everyone's like angry, everyone is like frustrated, and there's like so much of like just this like surface level engagement where I don't even like know like who's my friend or like who's around. Um and so it took a lot of like, okay, I need to set my own boundaries around how much do I engage with this, and being more intentional about like connecting with people. Because it's very easy to be like, I love Cloud and I love I don't know, Tifa, and I like love these interactions. I'm gonna go talk to all these people about how much I like these interactions.
Right.
But then if you build your whole identity around this one thing, right? If something happens where you're pushed out of that community, or if you're, I don't know, just shift your thinking, all of a sudden you look around and you're like, oh, I don't have anybody, right? And so then there's that like that so yeah, and it goes back to that herd mentality of like we are very much designed to connect with people, and sometimes we do that to the detriment of our own identity. And if we're not careful about that, and if we don't set boundaries, we will shift and morph to fit other people's vision of who we are, and in so doing, we lose ourselves.
I've
You
never done
say
that
in
in my
your-
entire life, ever.
Yeah,
Never.
yeah. I wish.
Evan's perfect.
I wish getting like a degree in like all this that it negates mental health or negates like negative outcomes, but it doesn't.
If only. You mention in your Psychology of Cloud video the following statement. You say, so many of us are desperate to be accepted, so we'll try to form and fit to other people's views of us. What was it about Cloud's story that really resonated with you on that level?
I think it came down to, there was one, because as I was writing Cloud's psychology, I was actually like a little lost through like half of it. It was just so deep. I didn't know the characters as well. Like halfway through the Cloud psychology video, I was very lost in what I wanted to get across, because I was like, Cloud's character, I still don't really understand who this character is, because it doesn't feel like it's any one thing, right? And then I came across this line, I think in like the third or fourth act, where he says something about like 1 billion mirror fragments, right? And actually, I think I was talking to Gallagher, and he mentioned like, oh, this is actually a reference to Xenogears or something, and I was like, oh, cool. But like it still fit in there narratively with Cloud, I didn't know that was like an Easter egg, but that's when it kind of solidified of like Cloud has been trying to be this thing for other people so much that he's just lost himself, right? Like he wants to be this like cool aloof person for like for Tifa, or he wants to be like this caring person for Aerith, and he gets so lost in like portraying somebody strong that he never has like that actual time to actually become strong, right? Like he wants to portray something and then he looks up to so much that he builds this persona around something that doesn't actually exist, and so when he hits that tension, it fractures him. So yeah.
You mentioned in that same kind of segment of your video the live stream sequence, the kind of I guess end of Act 2, beginning of Act 3 sort of sequence that so many fans are looking forward to. It's the live stream sequence where Cloud has lost himself and Tifa helps find him. And you distinguish between core memories and general memories, core beliefs, founding core memories, and all this kind of stuff. Talk to us a little bit about that, because you started to go into some really cool depths. And I was just like, so what is a core memory and how would I identify that for myself?
Yeah. So I think I had to like stop myself from like going on like a tangent about
I could have listened for 30 more minutes, Basil. Let's go.
So there's this idea, and it's rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy. But we have these schemas are kind of just basic, but we have these things that we build around ourselves and about the world around us, right? We have these core beliefs about this is how things work, right? Everyone's core beliefs are different, right? For some people, we might believe that the world is safe, right? That there are people out there that care about us. People have our best interests at heart, right? And so if we have core beliefs, then the way that we interpret the world and the interactions around us are going to be completely different than the core beliefs that somebody has, that like they're not safe or they can't trust anybody, right? If somebody walks up to you and I don't know, they curse you out, right? If somebody has a core belief of like, people are inherently good, right? Then our initial reaction might be like, oh, they must just be having a bad day, or maybe what's got into them, right? It's a lot easier to like laugh that off, or to not take that personally, as opposed to like, oh, people I can't trust people, right? And so if someone curses me off, I'm much more likely to just cut that person off, right? Like I don't like, oh, they've showed their true colors. Now I know that like the thoughts I've had before are valid and I shouldn't trust them. Right? And so at a fundamental level, we all have these, and that's like a very basic one, like a very basic example. But at a fundamental level, right, we all have some beliefs about how the world works, and that is how we come at things, right? And so, yeah, core beliefs are fascinating because they're very, very hard to shift, right? We can shift them when we have enough evidence. We can shift that core belief to something else. But usually it takes a lot of evidence.
You say that every time we recall something, we subtly shift it as well.
Yeah.
And that, to me, combined with the core memories and core beliefs, was maybe the most profound thing that you had so many profound moments. I was just like writing down everything I heard. And you pair it with this live stream sequence, and you say these core memories of Tifa and Tifa falling and nearly dying in childhood. Cloud isn't able to save her. Cloud isn't included in their childhood friend group. He goes off to soldier and he doesn't make the cut. And each time you say that as he recalls these things, he's shifting the core belief rooted in that memory. So he blames himself for not saving Tifa. He blames others for his circumstance of feeling weak. It was them that kept him apart. If he was weak. And so it's a self-authorship that is kind of self-degrading. He goes off to soldier and he's not good enough. And so shame and embarrassment drive him. What is it about revisiting core memories that shifts his core beliefs in that final act, OG7?
It comes back to Tifa actually.
Okay.
And I don't know if I say it in the video, but like I think Tifa is such an important part of that reconstruction because um, it's this evidence against it, right? Where she, I think, the point of like, oh, I didn't know you wanted to hang out with us, right? I didn't know that was such an important thing. And she doesn't tell him what to think, right? Because in that moment of it would have been very easy for her to take the reins and just be like, this is what you should think, right? But in so doing that, it would then just shift Cloud's dependence, because before it was very much hinged on, I want to be a strong hero like Zack, right? Or I want to be like a strong soldier for like to protect this person, right? It would have shifted that to, oh, I am okay or I'm good enough because Tifa thinks so, right? And so like that would not have been helpful, and I think Tifa sees that.
Do you believe that someone can reconstruct themselves, or do they need someone to curate or guide through that?
That's a good. It probably comes back to like resiliency theory, in the sense of like not everyone is going to be the same way, right? Someone else could have gone through Cloud's exact same experiences and had just different core beliefs, right? He might have taken the exact same information, processed it differently, and come out with fundamentally different core beliefs about that and about himself. And so I think for some people, they don't need somebody, but it's helpful in finding themselves to have guidance or to have support. For other people, I think they can do it. Support is important. I think it's one of the bases of like, I don't know, like strength.
Well, it's one of the things that the developers and at least the marketing team for Rebirth have really leaned into. I mean, they did the whole, supporting one another things. I forget the program that they called, but it was essentially talk to one another, support one another, be a friend to somebody today. And it's rooted in this game whose central key theme is about bonds, the bonds that you make, bonds that are broken, and all of this for 200 some odd hours. And I think, your video, even revisiting it today to prepare for this conversation, it reminded me of all the times that I've had to have somebody else help me reauthor and self-author moments of my past. We talked a bit before the show about how Evan and I met. We met, so we were both down here. We were in our mid 20s trying to figure out adulthood, and that's such a trying time career-wise, family-wise, all that stuff. And so he and another friend of ours would meet, and I would meet every Monday at Mellow Mushroom over pizza, and we'd just kind of talk, and we would speak that like reauthoring of our current situation. And so for me, I don't know if I could have. I'm sure with enough willpower and resiliency, like you said, I probably could have, but it was just curated so much more easily when somebody else was helping me guide through that.
Yeah,
So,
no, for sure. I think support is, I think, like I said before, like we're all built for connection.
yeah.
I think I'm just pointing out the uniqueness of like everyone's different, right? Everyone's going to process things differently, because there are people that go through very, very traumatic things and they're fine, for the most part, right? And so for somebody else to come around and say, "Oh, well, you had these experiences, so you must have X, Y, and Z," right? Is very much diminishing their own resiliency and their own strength. And so that's why I'm always careful. Like, I don't want to definitively say like you need support,
I love that
even
so
though
much.
a lot of us do benefit greatly from that. So
In the video, and then this is my final quote, and I just have to get it out. You said, have you ever had somebody rapid fire quotes of things you've said? You said that Cloud's strength doesn't come from his friends, which was really interesting. Instead, it's how he feels about them, his desire to protect them. Essentially, it's his bonds that really make him strong. I love that. Can you speak to that? What's the difference between his strength doesn't come from his friends Instead, it comes from his desire to protect them.
Yeah, I think it comes from like I kind of again going back to like we're all designed for connection, right?
Mm.
But if we're so fixated on I need this person or I need these people and that's what makes me strong,
Mhm.
it sets us up to be very dependent on them. It kind of comes from like Kingdom Hearts, where like Sora's phrase all the time is "My friends are my power,"
Mhm.
great. But then we see this moment where spoilers, where in the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, right, all of his friends are decimated, right? They're
Mhm.
just gone, and you see how that like that monologue, that those inner thoughts, that core belief, where his friends are gone, and he's like, I'm nothing without them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of bled over into like Cloud and how I characterized him,
Mm.
in the sense of like if Cloud was so like if he it goes back to like what I was saying about Tifa, right? It was very important that he found the strength inside of himself to protect
Mhm.
what matters, and not so much that his friends gave him the power to protect.
Yeah.
And I think Advent Children, honest, like I don't know what everyone's thoughts are on Advent Children. I watched it after the fact, so I wasn't like part of the Seven community when it came out.
Okay.
I wasn't in all that like conversation. For me, when I started this psychology video, I was coming at it like fresh eyes.
Oh boy.
And
Yeah.
so seeing this shift of like, okay, he had like he fought back against Sephiroth, right? He proved to himself that he was strong, and then all of a sudden to shift backwards almost
Mm.
Advent Children was like a very important like part for me, because I was like, okay, this shows that in this moment where Cloud was telling everyone in 7 right before the final battle, go find yourselves, go find the reason that you're
Yeah.
doing this. You need to be like you need to know why you're doing this, right? When he was saying that, he didn't know himself what he wanted, right? He was able to like rally himself with his friends to fight back. When everything was said and done, he still had that self-doubt, right? And I think that was like one of the core parts of Advent Children that gets missed a lot.
Mm.
So seeing him go through his own journey in Advent Children and figuring out like this is why he's strong, this is why he fights back, um, was important. So
I'm so glad that you said that, because Cloud's journey in Advent Children, some people are very much like, we just need to not have Advent Children. I love Advent Children
Mhm.
because I'm a firm believer that your journey doesn't end at your
Yes,
climactic moment,
yes.
right? Like there's a story afterwards, and that story is oftentimes more compelling because it's how do you reckon with the events that were so catalytic for
And it,
you?
it often involves a motorcycle.
Yes,
Yeah,
and it does. Starting around 35, it absolutely does. So,
yeah. I think that's what I liked so much about it, was because like I think Cloud instinctually fought back against Sephiroth, knowing that he wanted to protect his friends.
mhm.
But then like after that, he still had to like kind of reconcile and work on himself and still figure himself out. Which I think is very humanizing. Like I
Yeah.
think we all think of the hero's journey as like this end all be all, right? Like I'm gonna go through this whole
Mhm.
ordeal and I'm gonna hit a heavy spot, but then I'm gonna really find myself and then I'm gonna be perfect. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, that's not how it goes.
Yeah.
Having like an actual like arc with especially Cloud, who so many people relate to, I think, kind of have that humanizing backstep,
Yeah.
was really really cool to see.
Absolutely amazing. So, in that same train, I've got two questions remaining. One's kind of big, and then one is maybe a little more fun, I guess. I'm not sure. But we talked so much about connection and rebirth. I think the devs even revealed that their key word was the bonds of relationship, bonds of friendship in this game. That was their driving focus. And you see it in the mini games and all this stuff, and the ways that characters playfully interact, and even the affinity system. But there's one sequence in the game that really speaks to when those bonds break down. There's a lot of them, but one in particular is the very famous, very beloved scene of Barrett and Dine. And it's this idea of how hatred has consumed Dine. Now they did make some changes to this, and I was just curious. what what do you take from that, and talk to us a little bit from the clinical side about hate and what hate does to a person.
hmm yeah. So when I first played through the Baradine section in Rebirth, I like broke down. Like it was
Mm,
probably one of the most powerful moments.
beautiful. Yeah.
And I almost characterize it as like, what does regret do,
Mm.
rather than hatred? Just because like you see these two characters, who like kind of going back full circle, where they both have the same traumatic event happen, right? But because of their core beliefs and because of like the people around them, they have two completely different outcomes. He has Marlene and has like this whole like motivation to do better and to like make sure that she's okay. And so it's almost like Dine shows what could have become of Barrett if he was also alone.
Mm.
And so I love that that parallel piece of
Wow.
here are the two outcomes of what could have happened, and like here is, I'm kind of going back to that focal point of Rebirth. Here are what the bonds of the people around us can have an impact on.
Wow.
And so yeah, I think yeah, the ending of all of that was, whew, grief is tough. Grief is something that is not, um it's not like you can sit down and talk about it for 10 minutes and then be okay with grief.
Mhm.
It's very complex. What Dime must have been feeling, thinking that he had lost everyone, and
Mhm.
what he went through because of that grief, and the things that he did. I mean, when he realizes that Marlene's okay, right? Like there's this like almost a break, right? Like he has this breaking point of, I'm trying to think. I think in the cutscene, he's like trying to like wipe his hands symbolically, like
Mhm.
physically, he's wiping his hands. He's like, I have so much blood on me, like I can't even like meet my daughter, right? I've
Right.
done so much. I thinking that she was gone, thinking everyone I loved was gone. I can't see her. Man, having like children and thinking of, oh man, it's rough.
Yeah,
Ugh.
that scene, I mean, it's iconic for a reason, and I think it's because it hits on such a personal level for all of us, with regret and grief and fear of
Worth.
acceptance or lack, all of that stuff. We all have stories about that. The way they tell this story in Rebirth, to many surprise, during the boss fight with Dyne, he gains this almost Resident Evil like
Yeah,
arm,
right.
with all of this, I guess, magnetized mechanism just coming to his arm and stuff. What do you make of that?
Um, so I want to say somebody mentioned like Mako use, right? Or there was
Hmm.
something that he, I don't know if they ever specifically come out and say it, but there's this very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a very like slightly hinting that maybe he's like shifted into like Mako abuse or
Hmm.
Mako misuse, and that's why he's like seeing his wife, and uh, like that's why he's like having these breaks from reality, and maybe that's why he can, you know, bend reality, or I don't know, like that Resident Evil stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that when I read that and when I saw that, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, because
Yeah.
with regret, like with because regret makes us, I gotta keep myself focused. I don't want to jump off into too many things. With regret, it is, there's so much internal struggle that happens, right? Like
Yeah.
there is so much, uh, just like rethinking everything that we've thought was normal, right? Like with regret, we have these holes that dig into our life, right? Um, and so we have a decision with regret where we can either sit in front of those holes and let them consume us, right? Or we can build around them, right? Like those holes don't go anywhere. We're
Mm.
always going to have that. And I think that's one of the things that is tough about regret and about grief and loss, is those pockets, those holes don't ever just magically heal. Um, we can either fall into them and we can let it consume us, or we can, start to build around them to not get back to normal but have a new normal,
Mhm.
Mm.
right? um and again, that's a very simplified way of looking at it too, right? There's because sometimes we will build around it and we will start to heal only to fall into that grief and at a later point in life. And so it's very much like a not point A to point B kind of thing with grief and loss. With Dine, that coping with that was not to build around it, but to distract himself, to make himself forget about it, right? And so I think it makes perfect sense that he would, like, try to use Mako to connect with the live stream to see his beloved. I don't know if he knew that would happen, but I think that it makes complete sense that he would shift into like Mako misuse.
It really does, because you hit a point where the grief or regret or hatred or whatever feeling, anguish and angst that you begin to feel, you've got to do something about that. And one of the most interesting scenes for me in the game with Barrett and Dine, I would love your take on this, when Dine has just continued to build. For everybody listening, both Barrett and Dine lost their arms during an escape from their hometown when it was under siege. And they both separately augmented their arms with artillery, so a machine gun on each one of their arms. During the battle between Barrett and Dine augments his even further with even more things, and it's from the Mako misuse that Bio has mentioned. But after the battle, Barrett removes his. And it's such an interesting piece. There's these two people with this core memory, but their core belief has caused them to augment themselves differently. For Dine, he's building something that he's going to exact revenge, right? And Barrett is trying to do something for a means to an end, almost to end a time of hatred or death. Or talk to me a little bit about that. Does that make sense from a clinical standpoint? How might you have seen that?
So, like, with Barrett, it's very much, excuse me, it's very much like like you said, like a means to an end. Like it's I'm doing these things, I don't like it, passionate about not having somebody else experience the same thing I did, that I'm going to do whatever it takes, right? And I think that's a very simplified look at who Barrett is, but like, essentially, I'm going to protect the people that I need to protect, and I'm going to do whatever means necessary. That might mean I'm the bad guy, and I'm fine taking that role, as we see in the beginning of Remake and beginning of 7, where he's very much just like, I'm going to be aggressive and get my way because the end goal is I'm protecting what matters. Whereas with Dine, it's very much like, I have nothing left. I'm going to take down as many people as possible. Essentially, like, I'm going to just hurt other people because I'm hurt. And so I want to say in the original, he like talks about like taking Marlene with him, right? Like, it's very much like, this world is terrible. There's nothing good in this world. I'm just going to end it, essentially.
Yeah, end it and end Marlene, and they're going to reunite as a family in the afterlife. Whatever that is.
Nihilistic in the sense of like nothing is good, right? There's nothing good here. Like, I need to like just end everything when I can. And I think encapsulated his grief so well, because he was there's a part in the end of Rebirth or the end of his time in Rebirth where he's like, I don't want to be here, right? I have wanted to leave this place for a long time, and I have not been able to. Like, I know what I need to do, and I can't do it. And I think that was, again, like a very humanizing thing, a very like upsetting thing of like, I don't know. It's hard to talk about topics like this because like, going to like content, like, you don't want to say the wrong thing and get like demonetized. Right. Like, if you say certain words, like it reduces your reach. But like, these are things that everybody struggles with. And I think that like having a character and having an arc like this of like, I have these thoughts that like, I want to hurt myself. I don't want to be here, but I'm too scared where like I just can't follow through with it. And I think that was like, I don't know. I think that was like a really important thing to include in that of like with with regret, with this grief, like people have those thoughts. Like people don't want to be here, don't want to be on
Yeah.
this earth. And sometimes like they are just one step away from making a really, really harmful, devastating decision. And like there's not a good choice. It's not like there's not a happy ending to that.
Right. I feel like that's such a sensitive topic that Rebirth kind of elegantly looks at and says, like, this is suffering, and this is the way that we try to mitigate suffering in our lives. And everybody's just trying to do the best they can, and it's tiring, it's exhausting.
And
And
that's why he shifts to
right.
um
Right.
and like the ending of Dying is not a happy ending in
No.
any sense of the word. There's no resolution to his feelings, right? He learns that his daughter's alive and that he's done so much that he feels like he can't go see her.
Right.
He saves Barrett, but not in the sense of like it's not even chivalrous. It's just like it's just in a moment of pain he tries to take out Shinra, who's hurt him more, and so then he falls on Barrett, and it's not even a nice goodbye, right? It's carry this guilt, carry this weight
Carry
that
this, the weight of this, like you're carrying this from now on.
it's yeah.
And again, what a powerful moment when Cloud, in a remarkable departure of his usual self, just says to him, "Hey, you don't have to bear this alone. We're with you."
Yeah.
To me, that almost brought a tear to my eye because it's like, Cloud, you're like the most emotionally unavailable person in this game, and all of a sudden you're like, giving Barrett like a big hug. He doesn't in the game; he's not that close, but emotionally he does.
Mhm. Well, I think it's because for a lot of people, Cloud is this like guy who just doesn't understand stuff.
Yeah.
When in reality, he doesn't know how to talk about things, right? And
Yeah.
so when he sees this burden, right, this weight, part of him can relate to that. And I
Yeah.
think maybe it's something that he wants to hear. And often the times that we resonate and that we try to care for others, we're speaking what we wish we had heard, right? And so it's just
Boy,
almost like cathartic.
isn't
So
that just a
cathartic.
banger phrase? Like so often we're saying the things we wish we could be hearing. Yeah, that's amazing. And so true to reality.
Mhm.
We've talked a lot about Rebirth. I feel like, you have opened my eyes to look at some of these scenes so differently, and I can't thank you enough for that. Thinking about the future, what's one thing that you want to see and really hope is detailed in part 3?
I I really like I still come back to that like nihilistic, like tragic ending where I just
Everyone
think
gets
it
to
was
die.
right. Oh, and it's not like it sounds so bad like saying it out loud, but I just think like having this moment where they all know the decision that they have to make, right? They see both futures, right? Of like this is what happens if Aerith and Zack come back, and this is the future where like both of them don't come back. These are the consequences that happen, and are you okay taking those consequences? And I think like having that decision, honestly, like my dream is like we have a branching sequence, right? Where like we as the player get to make that decision,
Oh
and then we
my
have to see
gosh.
it play out. It'll never happen, right? None of this will ever happen, because I very
But
much think
what
they
if?
have it away. But my
Maybe you
dream
can
scenario,
influence
what
the
if?
devs.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Influence.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think this would ever happen. But having that like branching sequence of like
Yeah.
we can decide either to save these people, which I think a lot of people would, and then we just have all these cataclysmic, terrible things happen. I don't know. Like I think a lot of times we, especially with Aerith, so many people want her to live. Right? There were so
Yeah.
many people who would make up mods or who make like these what if
Mhm.
scenarios, like back before we could fact check everything, where people would like write out these long posts about like, what would happen, like this is my game glitched and I actually saved Aerith, right?
Mhm.
And so like seeing the end product of that and like realizing like, oh, this is why this had to happen. I don't know, I just think that'd be cool.
No, that would be amazing. It would be a I imagine it would be a technically developmental nightmare
Oh yeah,
trying
for
to
sure.
figure out all of
I
these.
mean,
Possible.
no,
I mean, who knows?
yeah. If Schrodinger's baby seal is listening, he's rolling his eyes. I've yapped so much about this. But
That's
yeah, that
okay.
would be my
I'm pretty sure he influenced the devs to have the characters brought out on stretchers for that one trailer.
Oh
So,
yeah.
I know he was screaming
Oh,
at the Game
man.
Awards or whatever it was.
That was wild.
Well, Roxas, is there anything else that you want to say, just by way of closing out? This is kind of your floor, your open mic time.
I think the only other thing I wanted to talk about was there's this moment at the end of Rebirth. I think it's during the Temple of the Ancients. I
Okay.
want to say. It's that moment where like each person has to like go through their own
The
trauma.
trials, yeah.
Yeah, the trials. And that is like one of my favorite parts, and I would love to make like a deep dive into it because it's so powerful,
It
and I
is.
think it sets up so much of like that conversation Cloud is going to have where he's like, you guys need to figure out why you're fighting, right? And it sets up
Yeah.
those pieces of like,
Oh, it does.
here is everything, right?
It does.
Yeah. And I would love to see all of that kind of connect and keep growing in the future games. But section was so powerful. Like amazing.
Everyone I speak to, they always have something to say about those trials. What is it about those trials that do you think hits at a human level, like universally?
I think it's just like one, I think it's new. Right?
Mm.
I think that's one of the things of I think most of it is either like talked about in future like books or in like kind of fleshed out in different scenarios.
Mhm.
But it like that's one of the parts where it's like, oh, this is new. This is something that we haven't seen before. So I think that's one reason why it's so like getting powerful.
Mm.
But then I think the other piece is like and are very much humanizing things, grief, loss with Barrett, that feeling of uh, that feeling of with Aerith. Like that's probably one of the saddest scenes for me is like
Oh, for
that
sure.
feeling of helplessness as like the person that is supposed to be my caretaker, that's supposed to know what's going on and supposed to protect me, is now not there, right? Like I'm now having to go look for help for the person that I thought was like, my protector.
Mhm.
And I think that helplessness feeling is very relational, or relatable. Sorry.
Yeah.
Trying to think of the other characters. I think each one just had a very humanizing element to it that was very relatable on just a fundamental level.
Well, those trials, to me, were some of the most fascinating things in the entire game, just because it did build the lore. And what I can say is, this interview is going to come out the same week as a video essay I've got coming out to address some of those trials. So this is a really nice kind of launch pad for that. It's going to be really good. So I think you're going to like it. So
I'll keep my eyes peeled.
Evan, anything from you as we close out?
How can people find you? What do you have coming up that you want to share and chat about? You're excited about.
So I'm on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. Those are like my three main things. Coming up, I'll probably still be working on the psychology of Xehanort. That's my next like big video I want to put out. Sora is like the main character of Kingdom Hearts, but I feel like Xehanort is almost like a second main character in that series, just with how much backstory and character development that he has. And so I've been like poring over all the games, trying to put together this cohesive breakdown of Kingdom Hearts 3. We're like, why did he do this 180? Like, what is he going on about? And it's like, if you just play the games and you don't dive into like the secret reports, the side games, like Xehanort's motivations seem to shift pretty quickly and drastically. But if you know Xehanort, all of his decisions and everything are very much fun, like very much like driven by one singular motivation. And so I want to make a video on that. Wanting to do like a more casual psychology of format for streams. So that'll be coming out at some point.
Cool.
That's
But
awesome.
doing,
Cool.
yeah, like playing through games, and I feel like kind of like with this podcast, like it's easy to get off onto like other tangents and flesh out ideas that I can only briefly touch on in videos. And so
Mhm.
having that more like casual format for streams, I think would be like really interesting to dive into different games to give more of like a, you know, psychology of certain games rather than like doing like a short and brief blurb for a
Mhm.
character. So
That's awesome. That is exactly the kind of content that I crave. So I will be waiting eagerly for that.
yeah, thanks.
Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for coming
Yeah,
on. I'll let
seriously.
you wrap.
Yeah, I'm so honored that you guys wanted to talk to
Oh
me.
my
I'm
gosh.
very appreciative.
Amazing.
Oh, Bio, like I said, the honor is all ours, and we are so glad that you made time to be with us tonight. So thank you so much. Everybody go check out Bio-Roxas on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter/X. I guess we're supposed to call it that now. So everybody go and check out all of Bio's stuff. And with that, we are excited to continue our Final Fantasy VII Rebirth lecture series. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode, as well as lecture plays on Tuesday and Thursday of various chapters of Rebirth as we go through the semester. And until next time, we will see you in class.
Bye, everybody. Oh, the wiggle with the avatar.
Yeah,
I love that.
wiggle.
I'm leaving this in. This is
I don't have arms,
This
so
is, I don't have
That's so
arms.
good. It's awesome.
I don't have arms, he says. Oh, this is
Dude,
gonna
that
fade
was
out.
an amazing
moved-
conversation.
I
love
moved
it.
my character up. I have no.
Oh,
no.
he has no
Oh,
legs.
it floats! Oh,
Their immersion break.
they took his legs.
I know.
No.
They
Oh.
took his legs. This is
The
how
only-
this
yeah,
episode's
everything
gonna
is-
end. Oh, his legs. Thank you so much to Bio-Roxas for the interview and the great conversation. Thanks to Husky by the Geek for the use of this amazing theme song that you wrote for us. Thanks to Nick Smith for doing the graphics. And thanks to viewers like you for tuning in, all the support, the likes, the comments, all the subscribing that you're doing. We really do appreciate it. Just a special note too, hop on over to that podcast that we've got there and hit subscribe on that too. It really helps us out. We hope that you have a fantastic rest of your week, and we will see you next episode. Bye-bye.